Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
It is 8:37 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. I'm Larry O'Connor. Good morning, Brian Wilson.
Hey, how you doing, Larry?
Well, the U.S. economy added 164,000 jobs.
46.
Oh, 46, thank you. And so now the jobless rate has dropped to a four-year low, 7.7%, which is a bit of a surprise. People were expecting the hurricane to have an effect on jobs in November. 7.7% is the lowest it has been since December of 2008, which is exactly 4 years. Let's talk about that and all other major news here in Washington,
lots
D.C.
of news going on
with our guest, Bret Baier from Fox News Channel. Bret, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So now, are you surprised by that number, and what do you think the political ramifications will be with the fiscal cliff negotiations? Is that going to help hurt the president?
Yeah, I am surprised by the number. I don't think it affects the negotiations. They're not going well.
Are there negotiations?
Yeah, I don't think there are negotiations at this point. But listen, it is a good number for the White House and for the president, especially in the wake of Hurricane Sandy. I mean, you look at that slowdown just in the region there and all of the disruption that caused, and still to have that number. The jobs created is still lower than was projected, but the rate going down and overall, with all things considered, not a bad picture, for the economy in context.
I mean, I know it's the benchmark that we all use and look at, but I've never thought that it was truth, because it doesn't really reflect how many people get discouraged and leave the market. I note that I'm looking here at the Twitter machine, and it says Jim Pethokoukis, who's a good friend of this program, says that if the unemployment rate in November had remained steady since October, that the true unemployment would be 8%. It would not have gone down.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I get that it's a good number and it's the benchmark we look at, but I've always thought that it was sort of a false benchmark.
Sure. I mean, and the same thing goes if the same number of people were in the job market when President Obama took office, the number would be about 11% unemployment.
Right.
But a lot of people were out of the job market, but they're starting to come back in, and there are slight signs that the economy is improving, but again, this fiscal cliff negotiation is, it has a potential to disrupt any small amount of recovery that was happening. If you go over the cliff, a lot of people are saying the markets will react pretty bad.
Well, one prominent little note in the unemployment numbers came up yesterday, and that was somebody leaving their job. It was Senator Jim DeMint from the state of South Carolina.
But he's got another one, right?
Right, but he's going red. Luckily, it will not affect the numbers because he's going straight to the Heritage Foundation. I wonder, Bret Baier, what this says about the Heritage Foundation. Jim DeMint has been so connected with the Tea Party movement, and Heritage Foundation is sort of seen as, dare I say, the establishment Republican kind of think tank. Is the Heritage Foundation signaling that they're making a major shift in their profile and in their ideology?
Well, that's an interesting point. I think we haven't focused that much on what it means for the Heritage Foundation. I think it does mean that it perhaps is getting a bit more aggressive in its conservative pitch and where it believes it's going. But, the Heritage Foundation has a lot of research, a lot of thought pieces, a lot of events that happen that really drive conservative thought and for a lot of lawmakers throughout the year. So it's a big deal. And there were people who were very critical of the move, saying he was punting, going for the money. There was a lot on Twitter yesterday, but there were others like Eric Erickson of RedState.com and others who said, this is a guy who's probably going to lead from a post that has a lot higher profile at Heritage.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't in leadership in the Senate, certainly. I mean, he was an outspoken person, but he didn't really have much influence in terms of legislation because he wasn't part of the leadership. So he could actually potentially do more from that position. Now, the question then becomes what happens to his seat in South Carolina. There's a lot of intrigue, and a lot of people are speculating that maybe Governor Nikki Haley will just appoint herself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's most likely that it goes to Representative Tim Scott.
That seems to be the guy, yeah.
From Charleston, which is, he's really well respected, and he's 47-year-old, but he's got a lot of supporters. African American from Charleston, defeated Strom Thurmond's son in that race, that primary, and would be the first African American Republican, I think, since 1970 or something.
Yeah.
And the only African American in the Senate currently.
Let me ask you, though, the other question that I think this really speaks to. Jim DeMint made a calculated decision. He could have stayed, in office and continued to work within the system and work within the Senate to change things and drive the things that he cares about. Or he could step outside and he could join the Heritage Foundation and work on the system from the outside. I think he made the calculated decision, at least is what he said, that I can actually have more impact outside the Senate than I can inside the Senate. Is a commentary on where we are today in politics?
Yeah, I do. I think that being in the minority, well, first of all, being in the Senate can be frustrating. Being in the minority in the Senate can be doubly frustrating, and I think that is a place that you can get swallowed up by, and in the current environment, it is very possible that he has much more influence being at Heritage than he would as a senator with a megaphone, but underneath the leadership megaphone. And always battling with Mitch McConnell for space at the microphone.
Speaking of the maddening process over there in the Senate, did you watch the spectacle of Mitch McConnell and Harry Reid going back and forth over these votes for the
whether or not
Obama
they should
plan?
allow a straight up or down vote on the Democratic plan offered by Tim Geithner?
Yeah, I did.
I love that.
Yeah, it's amazing because I think McConnell wanted to embarrass Reid and thinking that he didn't have the votes to move the debt ceiling forward, and then Reid decided, well, go ahead, and he called his bluff, and then McConnell said, you know what, let's make that a 60 threshold vote, not straight up or down, because suddenly he did have the votes.
Right. Which is kind of surprising, considering one of the things they were going to vote on was to cede the right to raise or lower the debt ceiling to the executive branch. I'm kind of shocked that people in Congress, Democrats or Republicans, are willing to give away that Article I right to the executive branch.
Well, I don't think Republicans were at all. It was just a maneuver, and suddenly they just freaked out when they realized, oh my gosh, they're going to move forward with this.
Yeah. Yikes.
I'm not sure they had the votes. But anyway,
they did the Roadrunner thing.
A lot of gamesmanship going. Hey, Brett, good to have you.
You too.
Thanks for joining us. Have a great weekend.